Very excited to be joined by Jeff Trees. He's written a book called Right in the Middle, but Left Out. Such a great title. And the whole idea is it's not what you might think it is. It's a memoir, but it's a very serious subject that I think is one that's painful when it's a secret, and so many people struggle with it. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this.
Well, thank you for having me.
And, you talk about the realities of what it means. And the gist of the book is how to identify and deal with the realities of incest. And a lot of victims have a great bit of emotional, spiritual, physical, of course, sexual pain. And so often they get lost in what I call the shuffle of life. And they have problems in so many other areas because of it, and the people close to them are trying to grapple with it and understand. And in the book, is that a central theme that it's hard to share that, but once you share it, it's freeing?
Definitely. The whole idea right in the middle being left out is the idea that somehow you don't even know what has gone on, but you're right smack dab in the middle of all their pain and suffering. And there was no clue that, at least that you picked up on or could read. And then all of a sudden it hits you as to what it was, or they remember and they, share that with you. And once they share it, it releases a lot. But at the same time, you want to be able to reach out and touch them and help them. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you can't. And that's frustration.
And you've dealt with this, your life is so interesting as a UMC pastor, a teacher, a counselor, hospice chaplain, and even on a different side, professional singer and actor. And I bet you've come across, sadly, this kind of taboo a bunch in your life, right?
Oh, from the very beginning. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't had to deal with the issue. It's just they may not be aware that they haven't dealt with the issue. It's one of those things that, it's so taboo, nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
And when nobody talks about it, they don't know how to defend themselves or deal with it.
Yeah, and that was my next point. I was going to ask that. How do you defend yourself? How do you deal with it?
Well, it takes a lot of time, a lot of counseling, a lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching for individuals to be able to deal with it. Most of the time, they do not want to face the reality. They'll suppress all of the imagery and all the horrible things that happen to them so deeply that they don't want to recall it. And if they do, it just hits them so hard. It's so painful that they just want to go down the rabbit hole and hide. And it's a terrible thing to watch, especially if you love the person, if you care about the person. The trouble for me was after learning all these things and studying it even more, I was able to stand up in a congregation and be able to pick out the women who had been sexually abused as children. There was just certain signs that you just knew. And I could also see the men who had been sexually abused as children, which is devastating because you begin to know something and then they know you know. And that begins a different type of a relationship.
Yeah, and it's interesting, as you say, it begins a different kind of relationship. But the thing is we talk about this, in encouraging people, and I mentioned this, and this is, of course, one of the hardest times of their life. And as you said, the therapy, the prayer, everything that you have to go through. You've seen people also come out on the other side. And for anyone listening who may be harboring this secret, what would you tell them the coming out on the other side is like?
Well, it's probably the greatest freeing experience they'd ever have in their life. They realize that they're not the ones who caused it. They don't have to take ownership of it anymore. Somebody else can take that and run with it because they're free. They've been set free. You know, it's sort of like the song which we sing about Amazing Grace, and then we'll sing, and the chains have been set free. We've been set free from all these chains, and we need that. They need that desperately, so that they don't take everything so personally that they're the reason why they are the way they are. They're not the abuser. The abusers were the abusers. And that's a tremendous, freeing, wonderful insight to have. And all of a sudden, they can feel love and see love and understand love better than they ever have before, because they've always had this certain filter they had in terms of looking through that said, this is what love is. And it was the abuse. And so they were expecting it. They were looking somewhat for it, even subconsciously or unconsciously, you know, as they would say. It's just really painful to watch them go through that whole process.
And then they, you know, as you said, painful, you watch them go through that whole process, but wow, what a freeing state people become in once they can unburden themselves of that secret and start to get that healing. For you, what was it like pulling this together in a book? Because of all the knowledge you have, of all the people you've met, what was it like to put that down into print?
Well, that was my spiritual journey. I had to do it in order to, you know, you lose yourself in a situation like that. You know, when you're dealing with abuse of any kind, you can lose yourself in abuse, and especially as you study it, because it becomes a part of who you are. I never will forget that my theology professor in seminary made us go see a terrible movie that Clockwork Orange. I hated it. But the whole theme of the movie was, if you see violence enough, you'll become violent. And sure enough, I saw enough violence in that movie that I was violent about the movie. I just wanted to wipe it off the face of the earth. That was a great experience for me to have and to relate to and remember as I was going through this. Because as I was writing what I was feeling, and I had to go back to those feelings. I had to go back to those times and you know, dig through all the dirt and the scum and everything else that was there and filter it and then realize I was abused by her abusers or their abusers. And because I allowed myself to be vulnerable. And in doing so, it caused a great deal of pain, and also to question, okay, now what is your faith? What is your understanding? How can you help other people who don't understand? And I was surprised, that probably surprised me more than anything, is the number of people who I really truly believed would understand about the issue of incest. They had no clue on what to deal, you know, how to deal with the issue. And I became angry with them because of their ignorance. And it wasn't so much their fault. I hadn't taught them everything. And I didn't know until I went through it. So how could I expect them to know if they hadn't been through it?
Wow, what a powerful story. And you know, the other part of this is on the other side, you're a husband, a father, a grandfather, a great friend, a retired United Methodist pastor. I mentioned that, a retired hospice chaplain, a counselor, a mentor, speaker, so many more things. And I just bet that you've been just a great example to people that, look, I walk this, I went through this, I'm putting this down. And I bet that's encouraging to a lot of people. Is that what you hope you also accomplish with the book?
That's what I've wanted to be able to do with my book. It's been amazing because I've given a lot of copies of my book away to friends and other pastors and everything. And the feedback has been, wow, we didn't know. What an insight. I now have better insight as to some of the things I've gone through. I was able to help in those elements. That's what I wanted to do in writing the book, was to have a ministry to reach out and help people to be healed from these terrible experiences of life. So that's what I did.
Wow. Perfect place to end this. I hope everybody runs out and gets a copy of Jeffrey Tree's book, and it's called Right in the Middle but Left Out. You can pick it up Amazon, etc., all the places where books are sold. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing this.
Well, thank you, and God bless you for doing it, because this is my ministry. It's my love.